Hey, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Hanging On to Hope podcast.
I'm Brenda J.
And I'm Karen Wonder.
And we are HangingOnToHope.org.
This podcast is intended as educational and is not psychological or medical advice. Always consult a professional when needed, and we disclaim any liability in connection with the instruction, information, or advice given.
Hi, this is Brenda J. Since we have listeners from all over the world, we'd like to provide information on how to access domestic violence resources in other countries. Sarah McDougall has a free app that is safer than going to a website because it does not leave a browser trail. It includes verified resources in over 200 global regions. The Trauma Mamas app, it's called Trauma Mamas. This app is available on Google Play and the App Store. And that is traumamamas.app/links. And I will include the link to the app in the show notes. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Hanging On to Hope podcast. This is Brenda J. Today we have Amy and Emily on the podcast. Amy is an advocate for the city of Mesa and Emily for the town of Gilbert. They both help with Winged Hope Advocacy Center as well as Karen and I. And hey, I'd just like to welcome you both to the show, ladies.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us. We're happy to be here.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. This is such important information. So this is Karen. Today we'll be talking to the family members, friends, and advocates that want to help the domestic violence victim. Remember, every situation is different, so apply what is helpful to you. Even if you currently do not know anyone, it's good to educate yourself just in case. It's just good information to have. It's so very, very common, unfortunately. Maybe you have a friend that mentioned something to you, but you did not know how to respond. You can share this episode with them. This is just important information.
First, we'll go over some of the things you should do when assisting a domestic violence victim as a friend, family member, or advocate. So, Amy, go ahead and start us off.
Yeah, I think the number one thing that you can do to help is to educate yourself. Gather all the information that you can to learn about domestic violence. Sometimes your own feelings about violence can make it really difficult to confront the situation. Contact programs and services in your area that assist victims of domestic violence and their children. These programs not only offer people safety, but they also provide advocacy, support, and other needed services. Contact your local domestic violence hotline or program to talk to staff about your concerns. Domestic violence advocates can be an excellent source of support for both you and your friend. To learn more about the kinds of available help, to ask questions about a specific situation, and to learn how you can be an effective and supportive ally. Just really trust the importance of educating yourself. You don't know what you don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
It's also really important to approach the person at a time and place that is safe and confidential.
Start by expressing concern such as, I'm worried about your safety. I'm concerned someone's hurting you. But at the same point, you may need to confront your friend with the danger. At some point, you may find it difficult to be supportive of your friend if they remain in a violent relationship or return to the abuser after a temporary separation. Let your friend know that not everyone lives with abuse. Be willing to confront your friend with the physical and emotional harm that your friend and their children will suffer if they stay. Help your friend face up to this dangerous reality of living with an abusive partner. Remind your friend that even a push or a shove can result in serious injury. However, remember that there are many reasons your friend remains in the relationship. And remember to listen and be non-judgmental. Did you guys have any comments on that part about confronting them? I was curious when I read that, how you felt about that. You think it's okay to confront them in this way?
I think if it's coming from a place where you're doing it, again, with you don't know what they're going through. So it's important to trust that they and only they know what is safest for them.
Okay.
And so doing that with a listening ear. So you should be listening more than you're talking sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think going into the conversation saying things like, I'm not interested in being judgmental. I don't want to get in the driver's seat and make decisions for you. I just want you to know I'm here as a support and I want to listen and be an available resource for you. If we go in with that type of heart and go into conversations with that mindset, I think it's a good idea to be positively confrontational sometimes. Tell people we care about them.
Yeah, because as I was reading it, I was like, I don't know, I want someone to go approach someone and be all You need to do this. You know what I mean? We have to be loving. So
Yeah,
Mhm.
I think when you're approaching it with kindness and that I really see that you're hurting and I just want you to know that I see that you're hurting and I care about you and it makes me hurt when you're hurting. And so I want to do everything that I can to make sure that you're safe.
Yeah. Just coming across, showing your love that you're,
Mhm.
you're concerned about that person. So help your friend develop a safety plan. Encourage your friend to develop a plan to protect herself or himself and his or her children. Help your friend think through the steps to take if your friend's abuser becomes violent again. Make a list of people your friend can call in an emergency. Suggest that your friend put together and hide a suitcase of clothing, personal items, money, social security cards, bank books, the children's birth certificates and school records, and other important documents. Offer to keep this suitcase at your house if you're able to do so. Listen to our previous episode on creating a safety plan. We go over a lot of that information.
yeah, I think that's important because I know when I went through it, my brain just was not working and you're in such severe fight or flight that it would really be helpful to have a friend get your brain together and go, wait, grab your IDs, make sure you find this because I couldn't think very well. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I think maybe empowering them to say, hey, is it okay with you if I help you to organize a few things? Or is it okay with you if I keep an extra set of X, Y, and Z at my house? Would that help you feel more safe? Sometimes even the basic question of what can I do to help you feel safe? Or what would make you feel safe? Sometimes, like you mentioned, Brenda, when you're in that fight or flight moment, sometimes we don't even take the time to ask the simple question, what does safety feel like to me?
Yeah.
Well, that's a good.
I think sometimes talking about things normatively, like if you have a friend that's going through something like this, or you think they might be saying like, hey, if your grandfather died tomorrow, I would be here for you. And you'd be in fight or flight. You'd be in a grief process. And I would help you make a list of the things that are necessary over the next 24 hours and the next week. I'd bring meals. I'd help watch your kids. And regardless of the situation, I want to show up for you like that. So sometimes I can make people feel like it's a normative situation that they can maybe feel more comfortable accepting help because their friend wants to show up for them in an authentic way, regardless of what type of situation they're currently experiencing.
Yeah.
For sure. Take the time to listen and believe what they say and lend a sympathetic ear. Let your friend know that you care and that you're willing to listen. Don't force the issue, but allow your friend to come and talk to you. Your friend is ready to confide in you. Wait for that moment. Keep your mind open and really listen to what your friend tells you. Statements of support are so important. I'm here for you. I'm concerned for your safety. There's help available. You're not alone. It's not your fault. I believe you. I believe you. I believe you.
Communicate that you care about their safety, that they do not deserve to be hurt, and that the abuse is not their fault.
Tell them they are not crazy. A person who's been abused often feels upset, depressed, confused, and scared. Let them know that these are normal feelings.
Tell them good things about themselves and focus on your friend's strengths. Let them know you think they are smart, strong, and brave. Their abuser may be tearing them down and tearing down their self-esteem. Many abused people live with emotional as well as physical abuse. Your friend may be continually told by the abuser that they are a bad person, called names or other negative things. Without positive reinforcement from outside of the home, they may begin to believe these things and that they can't do anything right, that there really is something wrong with them. Give your friend the emotional support they need to believe that they are a good person. Help your friend examine their strengths and skills. Emphasize that your friend deserves life that is free from violence.
And respect their choices and empower them to make their own choices. Trust that they know what's safest for them.
Encourage them to build a wide support system. Help find a support group or encourage them to talk with friends and family.
Guide your friend to community services. When your friend asks for advice on what to do, share the information you gathered privately. Let your friend know that they're not alone and caring people are available to help. Encourage them to seek assistance of domestic violence advocates at the local domestic violence hotline or program. Assure your friend that any information they share will be kept strictly confidential. Many people who have been abused first seek the advice of marriage counselors, psychiatrists, or members of the clergy. Although many of these helpful professionals may be able to give your friend good advice, it is also important to remember that many helpful professionals are not specially trained to deal with domestic violence issues. If you think that your friend's clergy person, marriage counselor, psychiatrist, or other advisor is not specifically trained to deal with domestic violence issues, encourage your friend to contact a domestic violence hotline or service provider in the area.
Be a friend indeed. Tell your friend you're there when they need you. Provide whatever you can, transportation, childcare, financial assistance, or anything else you think could help your friend stay safe. Offer to take care of your friend's pet. Often abused persons delay leaving their homes because of the concern for their pets. If you can take care of your friend's pet while they're away, they may help your friend to leave sooner and will also help the pet stay safe from the abuser. So just letting them know that you're available for that.
And be patient. Self-empowerment may take longer than you want, so go at their pace, not yours. If your friend decides to leave, the first safe place your friend should contact is a local domestic violence hotline or domestic violence shelter. Shelter workers can help your friend examine available options. If your friend decides to leave, a shelter may be the safest place for them to go. Unfortunately, not all communities have shelters or safe homes. Sometimes shelters don't have enough room for all the people who need their help. Your friend may need to rely on family and friends for temporary housing. Be careful when offering and providing safety in your home. Abused people frequently face the most physical danger in their attempt to leave. Be very discreet and talk to a domestic violence program staff about the best way to handle this.
When to intervene, it cannot be overemphasized that domestic violence is a crime that can result in the serious injury and even death. If you know or have reasonable suspicion that an abuse incident is occurring, call the police immediately.
So now we're going to go over a few things you should not do. Did you want to go ahead and start with that, Emily?
Absolutely. Things that we do not want to do. Do not blame or accuse, diagnose or judge their choices. We want to be non-judgmental, not drawing conclusions about what they may be experiencing or feeling, and do not judge or criticize their abuser. Do not guilt your friend for what's happening or underestimate your friend's fear of any potential danger. Remember that your friend must make their own decisions about their life. Focus on supporting your friend's right to make their own choices and decisions.
Do not pressure them to leave the abusive relationship. There are many reasons why they may choose to stay. It is possible their abuser has threatened to hurt them or their children if they try to leave. The abuser may control their finances or have isolated the victim from friends and family, leaving them with very few resources of their own. The abuser may have promised to change and the victim may still love them. It is never as simple as encouraging the victim to just leave. But by all means, communicate that help does exist and that people in their community care about them and their children, and they want them to be safe.
Do not feel the need to be an expert. Do not try to provide counseling or advice, but do connect them to trained people who can help. If the person you know is in an abusive relationship and they are in need of safe shelter, they can call 24/7 crisis hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE, 1-800-799-7233.
And so now we're going to go over a few common thoughts or questions that you may have as a friend or family member. So did you want to start with yours, Amy?
Sure. So a lot of people think I shouldn't get involved in a private family matter. Domestic violence is not just a family problem. It's a crime with very serious repercussions for your friend or your friend's children and the entire community.
Another one that frequently comes up is the violence cannot be that serious. Domestic violence can involve things like threats, pushing, punching, slapping, strangulation, sexual assault, and assault with weapons. It's rarely a one-time occurrence, and it usually escalates in frequency and severity over time. Domestic violence results in more injuries that require medical treatment than rape, auto accidents, and muggings combined, according to a report for the Center of Disease Control. More than 50% of female homicide victims in the United States were killed in connection to intimate partner violence.
That kind of behavior does not go on in my neighborhood. Domestic violence occurs among all ages, races, and religions. It happens to people of all educational and income levels.
He or she must be doing something to provoke the violence. Your friend is the victim of battering. Your friend is not to blame, nor does your friend ever deserve such treatments. Whatever problems exist in a relationship, the use of violence to resolve them is never justified or acceptable.
If it's so bad, why doesn't she or he just leave? For most of us, the decision to end a relationship is not an easy one. A battered man or woman's emotional ties to his or her partner may be strong, supporting his or her hope that the violence will end. If he or she has been financially dependent on their partner and leaves their children, they will likely face severe economic hardship. They may not know about the available resources, or perhaps social justice systems have been unsupportive to them in the past. Religious, cultural, or family pressures may make them believe that it is their duty to keep their marriage until all costs. When they tried to leave in the past, they may have used violence to stop them.
Another one might be, doesn't he or she care about what's happening to their children? Your friend is probably doing his or her best to protect their children from violence. They may feel that the abuse is only directed at them and does not realize the effect that it can have on their children. Perhaps they believe that their children need a mother or father or lacks the resources or support to be able to support them on their own. The children may beg that person to stay, not wanting to leave their home, their friends, or their school. And they may feel in fear that if they leave, they could lose custody of their children.
I know him or her, and I really don't think that they could hurt anyone. Many abusers are not violent in other relationships. They can be charming and lovable in social situations, yet display extreme violence in the privacy of their home.
He or she must be sick. Battering is not a mental illness. Men and women who batter are accountable for their own actions. Viewing them as sick wrongly excuses them from taking responsibility for their behavior.
I think he or she has a drinking problem. Could that be the cause of the violence? Although alcohol or drugs may intensify an already existing violent behavior, it does not cause battering. Men and women who batter typically make excuses for their violence, claiming a loss of control due to alcohol, drugs, or extreme stress. Battering, however, does not represent a loss of control, but a way of achieving it.
How can he or she still care for someone who abuses him or her? Chances are the man or woman has not always been abusive. He or she might actually show remorse for their violence, promising that they will change. Your friend understandably hopes for that change. Their relationship probably involves a cycle of good times, bad times, and in-between times. However, the longer the violent relationship continues, the less likely there is to be any good times at all.
Lately, he or she has been distant. I don't know if we're still friends. The abuser senses that a partner with fewer relationships can be more easily controlled. The abuser may be extremely jealous of any relationships the partner has outside the home. A battered man or woman may distance himself or herself from friends, fearing that they will discover the violence and blame the victim for it. Try talking to your friend about the problem of battering in a general way. Let your friend know that you do not blame battered victims for the violence.
I think it's also important to say that a domestic violence isn't always just physical. Sometimes it's verbal or emotional.
Yeah.
So I just think it's important to say that because I think people just associate domestic violence with physical, which it is, but it can also be non-physical.
And I think it's also important to acknowledge that emotional abuse can be sometimes as destructive and sometimes more destructive.
Yeah, definitely. Because you don't have a bruise to point to. You start doubting your own thoughts and everything.
Is there any ways then that, since this is a podcast about the friend or family member helping, if it is emotional abuse, is there any suggestions you have for that, for a way a family member could help?
Would we be able to attach the power and control wheel as one of the pieces that they can look at? I have a lot of victims that I work with or family members that I'll provide a power and control wheel to and say like, hey, sometimes stuff sneaks up on us in relationships. Sometimes things start off really well. There's bits and pieces that we don't recognize as abuse. And it might be isolation or manipulation or using the kids in this situation. And there's all these different pieces that are emotional, physical, psychological, financial. And when they're able to actually look at examples and maybe highlight or jot down thoughts, it really is a good collaboration and self-reflection tool. And it can help family members facilitate those conversations too. I know it helps me a lot.
Yeah, you can just Google power and control wheel and it pulls up the samples of them right away. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
Great
there's different tactics. Yeah, there's different tactics.
And they even have one
change over from one tactic to another.
They even have the power and control wheel and the domestic violence hotline. So all the resources that we've been giving people, that's great advice.
It's a really good practical one because sometimes we really don't think of things like somebody checking someone's phone is usually a really big red flag, but the isolation stuff of like, oh no, like you should stay home and hang out with me and the kids tonight. You don't need to go to dinner with your sister. There's just tons of small examples that I think when we actually look at things in black and white, sometimes it really helps evaluate whether or not it's a safe and healthy relationship.
Yeah. And if you see maybe more than one tactic, because that's also very common.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because mine isolated me from my family, but not like we would have friends and different things. So it made me feel like but the people that I actually would have told and the people that would have saved me was my family. Mm-hmm. And I was isolated from them. He completely isolated me from them. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting. They know. So I see what you're saying. It looked like, oh, I'm allowed to talk to people. But yeah, not the people that probably would have saved me 22 years earlier. But yeah.
Wow.
I absolutely also think it's changed a lot. I've been working with survivors for 15 years and I mean, it's morphed a ton. We used to see one or two types of violence being perpetrated or abuse being perpetrated. And I feel like people are just getting more savvy and manipulative and across different categories. And it's definitely a disturbing trend. But I think if we have conversations like this and look at all the factors, we can do hopefully a really great job supporting people.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Well, we want to thank you both for your time and your expertise and just sharing. I know it was a lot of information to go over, but we really appreciate both of you for taking this time because it's so important for, our listeners to have this information or any friends and family to have this information. So Thank you both so much.
Yeah, I know sometimes it takes an army to help one person. So if people can listen to this podcast and do any of the things to help, it would be amazing. So yeah, any other feedback that you guys had that or do you think it's important?
I just have one other thing. When I talk with friends and family members, I always try to encourage them to take good care of themselves too. When we care about people that are going through situations like this and that are hurting, it often has triggering or trauma effects on the people that are trying to be helpful. So being mindful of taking good care of yourself too, taking those walks, doing the journaling, seeking counseling, if that's something that will help you. But you as a resource are going through this as well in some capacity. And I just really encourage you to take great care of yourself too.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. And I think acknowledging your own limitations too, as a support person, to just be very clear and transparent about, hey, I'm not a licensed therapist. I'm not a counselor, but I'm here to help in any way that I can and certainly help to link them to someone who is a professional if it exceeds your capacity. If, that's not something that you can provide for your friend or family member in an effort to take care of yourself too, because it can be very traumatic to, they call it vicarious trauma, to experience something secondhand. So making sure that you're taking care of yourself, but also acknowledging your limitations so that you don't put the victim at more risk.
Yes.
That's great advice.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having us. And thank you so much for the work and the commitment that you have to the community. I think that this is such a wonderful thing that you guys are doing and will be really helpful to get that information out. So thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you guys.
Yeah, and this is listened to in 65 countries. So I know Sarah McDougall has lists for domestic violence resources and those type of resources for, I forget how many countries, but all over the world. So if anybody else is listening from one of these other countries, I think the resources are different wherever you go. So yeah.
Yeah. Every state is different. Sometimes every county is different. Sometimes every court is different.
Yeah.
So yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So anything else that we might have forgot?
I mean, I'm sure there's so much. I think if there's one takeaway from this podcast, I would just say, try to get connected to a local agency in your community because there is a lot of support. There is a lot of resources. You are not alone. There is someone that can help and they may be thinking about things that you're not even considering. So just if you can connect with a local domestic violence support agency, they can really help to take some of the burden off of all of this stuff because it's super overwhelming.
Yeah.
But they specialize in this. They do it day in, day out. So just reach out to your community if you can.
And any last thoughts, Emily?
I completely agree with Amy. I think that'd be a great ending point. That's perfectly put. So,
okay.
No. And I think the other exciting thing about this is going to be, if I have somebody that's interested in doing a safety plan, I talk to them about it and it's a really traumatic week, that information may or may not stick. And I'm happy to have that conversation as many times as they'd like to, but sometimes they might have availability at 8:00 at night. And now if I can send them a link to this podcast and be like, hey, if you end up thinking of any other questions, or if you want to listen through this and then we can reconnect, this is going to be really a good, helpful baseline for people to have. This is going to be great.
I can't agree more. I thought the same thing. And I think Brenda and I actually talked about that. I was like, I cannot wait to be able to incorporate this into my outreach to victims. And I'm sending them emails all the time that say, hey, here's a couple of resources that we talked about. And, I gave you a lot of information and it's overwhelming. Yeah. So when you have the time to digest this information, you'll have it in your back pocket or whatever. To be able to equip them with something like this, where, they can take a deep dive if they want, or they can just list the quick, most important, essential things, is going to be really helpful, really empowering. So that's why I cannot thank you enough. This is going to help us in our safety planning discussions with the people that we work with. So
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm hoping everyone all over the world will use it as a resource and all over the country. I mean, that to make it easier. I mean, when you think about creating a safety plan, even advocates that are just starting out or trying to help, it's overwhelming. They can use it as a resource too. So,
Right.
yeah. Anyway, that was that's when we went through that. When I met Amy, it was like, okay, this needs to be done. Like we knew immediately.
We were doing it in real time, right? We were like, oh, we're safety planning right now.
You know,
Right. I think Emily said it takes a village, right? Yeah. And even that victim that we helped eventually did get into a shelter. And even with the shelter, even with all of the on-site support of an organization like that, it still takes a village.
yeah.
And I think people who've been dealing with isolation, like knowing that there's multiples of us is amazing. Like I was in Texas for 4 days doing site visits for the FAC that we're going to build. And so I was useless. I'm in other people's secure facilities. I can't step out and take phone calls. And so Joyce stepped in and talked to some of the victims. I know Amy helped a couple of them that week and I so appreciate it. But the fact that like we could be our own village and like staff ideas with each other or be like, all right, I thought of these 8 things, but this is the situation. Can you help me think of anything else that would maybe be beneficial? Or do you know a resource that I don't know? Like we just help each other shine and help more people, but we also can have each other's backs. And I think that's probably the best piece of advice for like new advocates. Like lean on your resources. Don't feel dumb asking questions. Always ask for help because I mean, until I sent out a bunch of emails saying like, who's bilingual in my community? Can someone help me? And Amy's like, oh yeah, I can help you with that. Like
that me.
That's me. Like it's amazing that we advocates are a very cool community of people who will help each other with anything. And I love that about us.
Oh yeah.
Definitely noticed that.
We got you.
Well, and just like we can't be available 24 hours a day. We'd love to. I mean, I'd love to have 12 Amy's, but I can't clone her yet. So until then, being able to send somebody this at the end of the day and be like, yeah, listen to this tonight, digest it. Let's reconnect at 9 a.m. if you're free. Like that'll be huge.
No worries.
Yeah, I think one thing that you just mentioned is it really reminded me of something is being clear and transparent about your role, like as an advocate or as a friend or support person, that you are not an emergency responder because you never want to give someone the impression that like, oh, hey, I'm here. I'm part of your safety net. I'm part of your support group. I am not an emergency responder. So if your life or your limb or your children or your family, your house are in any immediate danger, you got to call 911.
Yeah, and that comes up a ton for me because people hear Gilbert Police Department and they're like, oh, okay, cool. I'm sending you evidence. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's not me. So I have conversations on the front end about confidentiality, privileged communication, and the fact that I am not sworn. And so we talk about like, you can send me anything you want and loop me in on what's going on in your life. And I'm happy to go over things with you, but like we have to send evidence to sworn officers. So our limitations and our expectations with our own functionality. Amy, that's an excellent point. I talk about like, these are my business hours. Sometimes I'm available outside of them, but it's based on my schedule. So here's the emergency line, here's the non-emergency line, and here's my capabilities. That's super important. I agree with you on that 100%.
Yeah. Even in my work with Winged Hope, where, they're like, we work on weekends, we're volunteers, we never stop working. Right. But establishing that healthy boundary for your own mental and emotional health too, to be like, hey, I'm not a 24/7 emergency responder. I will get back to you as soon as I possibly can, but I am not available 24/7 because if I was, I would burn out and then I would be here to help others in my community who are going through what you're going through.
So is there any other important information that you wanted to add to that?
Abuse is never your fault. The person who's causing the harm is responsible for their own choices, behaviors, and consequences. And I am always here to support you and care about you and how you move forward. And so.
Yes, absolutely. It's very important for them because usually they're made to feel like it's their fault or something. So that's very important to stress. Yeah.
Right. Love should never hurt and everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you both so much for coming on to the podcast. Where can someone find you if they wanted to reach out, or who can they contact to get started on their safety plan?
I think if you live locally, the best thing to do is to just Google domestic violence support organizations in your area. I'm personally located at the Mesa Municipal Court with Victim Services, and a Google search of City of Mesa Victim Services would lead you to myself or one of my colleagues, all who are very capable of starting a safety plan with you.
Great.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. Lots of community-based organizations are great, and if it's safe for you to Google them, that's a good place to start. Amy's department is incredible. We collaborate quite often, and I appreciate them. Most court systems and police departments have advocates embedded that are able to assist. And if someone wanted to reach me personally, I am with the Gilbert Police Department. You can call our non-emergency line. Also, something you can Google, but it's 480-503-6500 and request a referral to Victim Services, and they'd be able to get you over to us as well.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having us, and thank you so much for the work and the commitment that you have to the community. I think that this is such a wonderful thing that you guys are doing and will be really helpful to get that information out. So thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're
amazing.
welcome. Thank you guys. Thanks for tuning in to Hanging On to Hope. Check out our website, hangingontohope.org. There are resources on there, and if you would like to donate or volunteer, you can do that through our website. We are a brand new nonprofit, so we appreciate any and all support. And we thank you for listening. And until next time, keep hanging on to hope. We are evidence that there is hope and healing for you, and our passion is to help you find it too. So thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for listening, everyone.